Brock has an exciting story, has done this, and so I want to talk a little bit with Brock tonight and hear what his story is. So, Brock, what got you interested in actually getting into a coding program?
Well, I was first exposed to programming in high school. I took 3 years of computer science, but it was just pretty basic, and I found out I really liked it. So then I went to college and got a degree in petroleum engineering, and they don't really teach programming and engineering that much. I think it was like half the class, which I think is unfortunate. But I always found ways to use it a little bit with like Excel, VBA type stuff. And then I got out of school and went to work for an operator in Houston, an oil and gas company, and found that my first internship in Houston with them, that I could use programming a lot. Actually, there was a dip even back in 2010 or 2009 that they only hired a few people from that intern class, and so I was able to get hired, but it was mainly because I'd used programming to go further than what they'd asked me to do. And so I kind of thought that was a fluke, like, oh, I was just lucky that I was in a team that needed this and they didn't see it. But then when I got out of school and started full time, found that it was everywhere. So like, there's plenty of guys that, they've been, petroleum engineers for 30, 40 years, and they're better than I ever want to be, honestly. And but they didn't necessarily know what a database was, or they didn't even know, they didn't know that they could really leverage what they were doing a lot faster now that data is becoming so important. And so I found myself gravitating towards software and through data analysis.
So were you self-learning when you were you trying to learn as you were in your job, and sort of self-learning? And
yeah, I really just learned mostly by reading books and just trying things on the job, and really enjoyed it.
So what attracted you about going to an extreme boot camp to be able to learn how to do that programming, since you were already in it?
Well, basically I got to the end of a project that I was really enjoying, and the project was ending, and so I was like, well, you can go to another team, back to kind of more traditional engineering, and I realized that it was going to be, same stuff that I was trying to teach myself, and I really wanted to, get more of a professional exposure to it, so I decided to do the Coder Camp in Houston for 3 months, and then right after that I've now switched, but that was great because honestly I was really thinking about doing like online, there's freecodecamp.com, Code Academy, and I really self-taught, so I was like, well, I'll just do that again. But I found that when I heard about Coder Camps, I met the instructor and realized that I was going to be there every day with a group of other people around me motivating me for 3 months straight. The thing that sold me was that there's a lot of things with programming that you don't know what you don't know. So you may try to go and just read a book or whatever, but the book's not going to tell you like, well, you may be doing it that way, but if you just knew this one other thing, that it would have been 5 times faster. And so by having the instructor there, that you're going to get that, and you're going to get it the second you realize that something's not working. You look up and say like, this isn't working. Whereas, even just an online course, like that's not realistic. Definitely not a free online course. And so that was what attracted me, was the in-person side. And I was still like not sure if I would end up liking it, but I'm sold on that. I may even do another boot camp in the future for like data science or something, just because my experience was really good. So.
And so, what was the structure of the boot camp? Like, how did that work for you?
Well, you start by doing a 3-week, I believe it was 3 weeks, like web intro to HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which are like the foundation. And I think they really use it to see who's going to be committed enough to succeed in the program, because they want to let people in who will be successful and get a job. And so it's much more straightforward, and you have access to instructors online. And then from there, you go to the in-person, where you're on campus for the 9 weeks straight, I guess it is. And they're still the same format online, so the instructor's kind of clicking through the lessons online, which you have access to at home as well. And so I would generally look at the lesson like at night for an hour or two, and then come prepared the next day to kind of ask questions and more in-depth stuff. And we would spend maybe half the time kind of talking to the lesson, and then the other half actually doing exercises to try to actually submit it, what we're learning. So.
Okay, and then so you did the 9 weeks of basically learning the different features. Now you went through a full stack program, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So you were learning the front end, the back end, and all those things.
yeah.
And so you did that for about 9 weeks, and then what did you transition to after that in the courses?
Well, so it was like the first 3 weeks, like I said, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Then we had 6 weeks of instruction. So that was where I did .NET, but y'all would do Node.js on the back end, and then learn modern JavaScript frameworks like Angular and a few other technologies, and learning Visual Studio and all that, C#. And then the last 3 weeks, I think it was 3 weeks, we got into a group of 4 of us and did a full built a full application in 3 weeks. And we actually, I think it's still up on AWS or on Azure, that you can see the app we built. That would have been a good idea to show that.
That would have been nice, you built
Yeah.
an app. All right, so you're able to build an app.
We can pull it up later over there. But it's a responsive design website. It was basically the idea. You pick your own thing you want to build. I have a sister who's in a nonprofit in Dallas, and so she organizes conferences. So we built an app with that user persona in mind, conference organizer.
Okay.
So it was fairly basic, but it looked very nice, very good to kind of put on your resume. People can look at what you did, and you learn everything you need to know. So like the way I look at it is like there's kind of a trunk of knowledge that I have now that when I want to go further with any area, I do know more of what I didn't know.
So when you got done with the boot camp, I know a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to get a job just right out of boot camp, but how did that experience go for you? What'd you have to do? Whatever.
So, I mean, it's very intense, or pretty intense boot camp. Plus, I have 2 kids at home. They're in the hogs, they're being too loud. So I didn't have a whole lot of time outside to start looking for jobs. But so I was a little more unique than some of the people there, in that I already had been working in Houston, and so I had a network, and had presented a couple conferences. So I ended up going to another conference, the conference I'd gone to a year before, as a patrol engineer, and just networking with people there, which I don't like doing, but ended up working out, I think, because I just was able to say, I was a patrol engineer, but I've always liked, software and software development, analytics, and so I did this intensive boot camp, and, be interested in talking to you about that, and ended up getting, I think, from that 2-day thing, 4 opportunities to talk to people, and ended up that over the next month, I got a few different offers, and right when I was about to accept one, and I'd get another call that was a little better, and so the last one, I think it was the 4th offer was with P2, where I work now, and I was looking at as a software developer, but I'm a product manager now, which is cool thing is I get to do a lot with software in terms of prototyping and getting it up and running, and I don't do as much hardcore development, but I know enough to where I can kind of say like this would be possible, and I know how to potentially hire somebody that's way smarter than me in that. So I'm like a B- or C student in programming because I didn't take it further after the camp, but I know how I can like find A+ guys enough from that. And so I know a lot of y'all probably would want to take it further. The cool thing is you can kind of choose what you want to do with it. I know some guys that they were Photoshop experts, and so they're still doing Photoshop after that, but they're now able to, for example, build their prototypes for a web design and actually write some of the HTML or understand how that's going to interact with the HTML better. So it's not that you have to necessarily just be a programmer afterwards.
All right, so there were options.
Yeah.
So you have to do that afterwards. So if somebody was telling you, I'm thinking about going to a boot camp, what would be the 1 or 2 things you would give them as like a key for them to be successful in that boot camp?
Well, after that, I would say do in person or don't do it. Try it, but you try it online or whatever, but one of the other issues is that when you're online, when you're doing it on your own, then you might say like, oh, I'm going to try to, do this exercise, and it says, make your own portfolio website that you can put things you've done. And what I know I would do is I would do the fun stuff, get it like mostly working, 80% done, and then I'm like, man, there's a lot of little bugs, and it's pretty much done. The fun part's done, so I'm going to go to something else. The problem is that the last 20%, even though it's maybe not as fun because you don't get to see a lot changing, that's where you really learn a lot, because you have to struggle to get through the things you couldn't figure out at first. In person, you know, there's no option to just stop, because like, you have to do it. And so that's just another advantage, and so, I would definitely recommend doing it in person would be one of the main things, actually.
And how many hours do you think you spent focusing on programming when you were immersed into the boot camp?
They told us to expect up to 100 hours, but it wasn't per week. It wasn't that much for me. I mean, I had experience before, and so I feel like that helped a lot. Basically, I knew how to think about coding. I knew about most of the programming concepts like loops, if statements, you know, variables, that type of stuff. But I didn't know the difference between Java and JavaScript. For example, I didn't know anything about what is .NET, that kind of stuff. But just knowing that was enough to where I think I spent, on average, maybe between 50 and 60 hours a week, probably.
50, 60,
And I could have spent more, but, you know, and would have learned even more, but that was enough to get a lot out of it, for sure.
And so what do you see yourself doing with this new skill moving forward? You're in your job as a project manager, and you're looking at going back and getting more, or moving on to another? Like how are you thinking?
For me personally, I saw an article a while back that said, if you look at what makes people successful or companies successful, is people who get into a cluster of knowledge and become an expert in that, or become pretty good at it, but then rather than getting really, really good at that and just staying there, they then are able to move into another cluster of knowledge, which is awkward because you're not good at it anymore, and you get to know people there. And so I feel like this has allowed me to rapidly do that with programming, that I can now go up to a developer and not sound stupid, and so I can like talk to them and get value out of that relationship quickly. So for me personally, I don't know that that I'll go much deeper with programming, but what I want to do is stay in software, because I think that software is going to continue to change the world, and you know, Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world, and you know, I agree with that. So.